This presentation is part 2 of our EVU mini course discussion of basic concepts. If you haven't already done so, please take a look at part 1 before you proceed with this mini course. We left off with a preliminary discussion of volts and amps and their real-world relationship to your EV. There are lots of additional things we could discuss, but the bottom line is how volts and amps play a role in charging your vehicle. And the best place to start is in your garage. For the purposes of our discussion here, volts and amps live in your garage. An electrician runs a line from your service panel. That's the gray box on the wall in your basement or garage where your circuit breakers are located. He then runs the circuit, which is just electrical wiring, to a location where the charging outlet for your EV will be located, usually in your garage. Electricity can then flow to that location. We'll talk a lot more about why volts and amps matter as you set up your garage charging circuit in a more advanced EVU mini course, so we won't go into details here. Suffice it to say that the higher the voltage, the more amps can be delivered to charge your battery. And that's important because the more amps delivered, the faster your battery charges. Whenever EVs are discussed, you'll likely hear people talking about kilowatts and kilowatt-hours. A kilowatt, which is 1,000 watts, is a measure of power, but it's also a measure of how quickly you fill your battery. A kilowatt-hour is a measure of capacity, how big the bucket is, or discarding that metaphor, how big your battery is. So when you see an EV manufacturer that touts a 24 kilowatt hour battery and another that talks about a 85 kilowatt hour battery, understand that the former has much less capacity than the latter. And as a consequence, the range of the first EV will be considerably less than the range of the second. In addition, the larger battery also leads to better overall vehicle performance, acceleration, and top speed. But the bottom line is understanding how much you'll save by driving an EV. Right now in the United States, gas prices are relatively low. But even today, filling an EV costs about 20% of what it costs to fill a conventional car. And if gas prices rise to, say, $4 a gallon, where they were for much of 2013, an EV looks even better in real dollar terms. With that in mind, two measures of consumption need to be considered. The first is miles per gallon equivalent. Miles per gallon equivalent indicate the number of miles an EV can travel using electricity that delivers the same energy content as a gallon of gasoline. That allows mile per gallon comparisons with internal combustion engine vehicles. For example, a Tesla Model S gets 95 miles per gallon equivalent, about 3 to 4 times better than comparable ICE vehicles. It is a bit difficult to do direct comparisons between the 4 different vehicle architectures on the road today, but we've made an attempt and provided a chart based on the U.S. Department of Energy statistics at the website fueleconomy.gov. The best fuel economy in any vehicle category is always found in smaller, lighter vehicles. And the worst is typically associated with large, heavy vehicles, like SUVs. The mile per gallon equivalent values attributed to hybrid or plug-in hybrid vehicles depend dramatically on the distance that such vehicles travel on a regular basis. If plug-in hybrids travel short distances only, they are comparable to EVs. However, if they travel longer distances regularly, say a 100-mile daily commute, their mile per gallon equivalent moves much closer to that of a fuel-efficient ICE vehicle. The very best EVs can get about 124 mile per gallon equivalent, and the very best ICE vehicles get around 42 miles per gallon. That's a 3-to-1 ratio in favor of EVs. For EVs, there is another measure of consumption, kilowatt hours per mile. That's a measure of energy consumption, but also a measure of the efficiency of the EV. Typically, EVs consume between 0.35 and 0.50 kilowatt hours per mile. The higher the speed, the greater the kilowatt hour consumption. The graph on the right of your screen illustrates this for a Tesla Model S. The vertical axis is kilowatt hours per mile consumed, and the horizontal axis is miles per hour. It should come as no surprise that the faster you drive, the more energy you consume, and therefore the less range your vehicle will have. We'll look at the reasons why in another EVU mini course. Another consumption metric is the E-gallon, developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. They define it in the following manner. The price of an E-gallon tells consumers how much it costs to drive an EV the same distance you could go on a gallon of unleaded gasoline in a similar car. If you're interested in the technical details, here's a quick summary of the E-gallon calculation. The calculation itself has it's effectively the product of three different values. The average fuel economy of a comparable ICE vehicle, the average kilowatt hours per mile of the top 5 EVs, and the average price of a kilowatt hour of electricity. But you don't need to run the numbers. An online calculator can be found at the link shown on your screen, and that will allow you to determine your E-gallon value for the state in which you live. In this continuation of our basic concepts mini course, we expanded on some general terms that are encountered repeatedly in discussions of EVs. Volts and amps live in your garage and have a significant impact on the way you can charge your EV. Kilowatt hours is a measure of the capacity of an EV battery. Miles per gallon equivalent, kilowatt hours per mile, and the E-gallon are all metrics that can be used to measure energy consumption and the relative efficiency of EVs. In the next EVU mini course in this sequence, we move on to EV architectures. That will help you to understand how EVs actually work and what options are available for those who want to enter the EV world.